Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin.
Marcy Voss adjusted her navy blazer and checked her watch. 3 minutes past 9. The courtroom doors opened with a soft whisper, and she stepped inside, her black leather briefcase gripped firmly in her right hand. Every step across the polished marble was deliberate, calculated. The civil hearing room buzzed with quiet conversation. Lawyers shuffled papers. Court staff prepared their stations. Marcy's eyes swept the space, cataloging faces, noting positions. 15 years of legal training never left her, even after everything that happened. "Mom, you're doing that thing again." Marcy turned. Her 17-year-old daughter, Celeste, sat in the second row of the gallery, arms crossed, wearing faded jeans and a graphic T-shirt that read, "Question everything." Dark hair fell across her shoulders, and her brown eyes held that familiar mixture of love and exasperation. "What thing?" Marcy asked. "That robot lawyer thing, where you scan everyone like they're suspects." "I'm being observant." "You're being intense." Celeste shifted in her seat. "Why did I have to come to this, anyway? It's just some boring business dispute." Marcy's jaw tightened. "It's not boring. And you're here because you asked to see what I do. I asked to see you work, not turn into some courtroom Terminator." Before Marcy could respond, the bailiff called out, "All rise." The Honorable Judge Leland Whitaker presiding. The room stood in unison. Judge Whitaker emerged from his chambers, black robes flowing behind him. He was in his early 60s, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that had seen thousands of cases. Marcy watched him take his seat behind the bench, her expression neutral despite the knot forming in her stomach. Whitaker's gaze swept the courtroom in routine fashion until it landed on Marcy. He froze. His pen stopped mid-motion above his notepad. For 5 full seconds, he stared at her with something between recognition and shock. He leaned toward his court clerk and whispered, "Is that her?" The clerk, a middle-aged woman with graying hair, glanced at Marcy and shrugged. She obviously had no idea what the judge meant. Marcy felt the stares from around the room. Other lawyers turned to look at her. The court reporter paused her setup. Even Celeste straightened up, sensing something unusual. "Your Honor." The bailiff prompted. Whitaker blinked and shook his head slightly. "Yes, please be seated. We'll hear the matter of Voss versus Meridian Holdings." As everyone sat down, Marcy noticed Vincent Hale at the plaintiff's table. He looked exactly as she remembered, tall, lean, with perfectly styled brown hair and an expensive charcoal suit. He shuffled through documents with the same arrogant confidence that had destroyed her career 15 years ago. Vincent's attorney, a sharp-faced woman in her 40s, stood up first. "Your Honor," Sandra Mills, representing the plaintiff, Meridian Holdings. "We're here today regarding the defendant's alleged breach of contract." Marcy tuned out the opening statements. She'd heard them all before during depositions. Instead, she studied Whitaker's face. He kept glancing at her, his expression troubled. His hands trembled slightly as he took notes. When her turn came, Marcy rose smoothly. "Marceline Voss, representing myself in this matter, Your Honor." "Representing yourself." Whitaker's voice cracked slightly. "Yes, Your Honor. I am a licensed attorney in the state of Georgia." Vincent's head snapped up at that. He stared at her with wide eyes, as if seeing a ghost. His attorney whispered something in his ear, but he didn't respond. "I see." Whitaker cleared his throat. "Please proceed with your statement." Marcy opened her briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "Your Honor, the plaintiff claims I breached our consulting agreement by failing to deliver services as promised. However, the contract clearly states that services would be provided subject to the client's cooperation and timely provision of necessary materials. The plaintiff failed to provide critical financial documents for 6 weeks, making it impossible to complete the contracted work within the specified time frame. She set the paper on the table and looked directly at Vincent. Additionally, the plaintiff's own internal emails, which I've submitted as evidence, show deliberate delays and obstruction designed to create grounds for this frivolous lawsuit. Vincent's face flushed red. He grabbed his attorney's arm and whispered urgently in her ear. Furthermore, Marcy continued, the plaintiff has a documented history of using litigation as a weapon against smaller consultants and contractors who lack the resources to fight back properly. Objection! Mills shot to her feet. Your Honor, counsel is making irrelevant accusations. Sustained. Whitaker's voice was weak. He rubbed his temples. Ms. Voss, please stick to the facts of this case. Of course, Your Honor. Marcy's smile was razor-thin. I withdraw the comment. But the damage was done. Vincent looked like he'd been slapped. Several people in the gallery murmured among themselves. Celeste leaned forward in her seat, suddenly interested. The hearing continued for another hour. Marcy presented her evidence, methodically emails, financial records, timeline documents. She spoke clearly and precisely, never raising her voice, never showing emotion. But underneath her calm exterior, something burned white-hot. When it was over, Whitaker announced he would issue his ruling within 10 days. As people filed out of the courtroom, Vincent approached Marcy's table. I can't believe you have the nerve to show your face in a courtroom again, he said quietly. Marcy closed her briefcase without looking at him. I have every right to be here. After what happened? After you were disgraced? You should have stayed buried. Now she looked up. Her green eyes were cold as winter. I was never disgraced, Vincent. I was sabotaged. There's a difference. You lost everything. Your job, your reputation, your future. You were finished. I was interrupted. Marcy stood up. Not finished. Vincent stepped closer, lowering his voice. You think you can just waltz back in here and pretend the past didn't happen? You think people forgot? I don't think people forgot anything. That's exactly what I'm counting on. Confusion flickered across Vincent's face. Before he could respond, Marcy walked past him toward the gallery where Celeste waited. Ready? Marcy asked her daughter. Celeste stared at her mother with new eyes. Who was that guy? Someone I used to know. And the judge? He looked like he'd seen a ghost when you walked in. Marcy glanced back at Whitaker, who was still sitting at his bench, staring at his hands. Old memories die hard. The drive home took 20 minutes through Atlanta's afternoon traffic. Celeste sat in the passenger seat of Marcy's 10-year-old Honda Civic, watching the city pass by. The silence stretched between them until finally Celeste couldn't stand it anymore. Okay, what was that really about? Marcy kept her eyes on the road. What do you mean? Mom, come on. That whole thing back there was weird. Everyone was staring at you like you were famous or something. And that guy Vincent looked like he wanted to crawl under a rock. It's complicated. I'm 17, not 7. Try me. Marcy pulled into their driveway and turned off the engine. Their small ranch house sat on a quiet street lined with oak trees. The lawn needed mowing. The front steps needed painting. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. You want the truth? Marcy asked. Always. Marcy stared at the house for a long moment. 15 years ago, I was a rising corporate attorney at one of Atlanta's biggest law firms. I worked 80-hour weeks, handled million-dollar cases, had a corner office on the 40th floor. What happened? Vincent Hale happened. Marcy's voice hardened. He was a partner at a competing firm. We were opposing counsel on a major case, a class action lawsuit against a pharmaceutical company. The plaintiffs were people who'd been harmed by a defective drug, families who'd lost everything. Celeste turned in her seat to face her mother fully. Vincent used legal loopholes and unethical tactics to block every move I made. He buried us in frivolous motions, filed for delay after delay, and used his firm's resources to exhaust our clients' patience and money. That's legal. Technically, but it wasn't right. When I found evidence that he was deliberately hiding critical documents from discovery, I brought it to the judge. Judge Whitaker. Yes, I had emails proving Vincent's firm was coaching witnesses to lie. I had financial records showing they were paying experts to provide false testimony. I had everything I needed to expose their entire operation. Marcy's hands tightened on the steering wheel, but Whitaker refused to look at the evidence. He said it was inadmissible due to improper discovery methods. He let Vincent walk away clean while our clients got nothing. That's horrible. It gets worse. Vincent filed a complaint with the state bar, claiming I'd obtained the evidence illegally. He said I'd hacked into his firm's computers, which was a lie. The documents came from a whistleblower inside his office, but I couldn't reveal my source without destroying their career. Celeste's eyes widened. What happened? The Bar Association launched an investigation. My firm suspended me pending the outcome. The media got hold of the story and painted me as an unethical lawyer who'd broken the law to win a case. But you were innocent. Innocent people don't always win. Marcy's voice was bitter. The investigation dragged on for months. My firm eventually fired me. No other law firm would hire me. My clients lost faith and found new lawyers. Within a year, I'd lost everything: my career, my reputation, my marriage. Dad left because of that. Your father left because he couldn't handle being married to someone the legal community saw as damaged goods. He was a lawyer too. It hurt his career just being associated with me. They sat in silence for a moment. Finally, Celeste asked, "So what are you going to do now?" Marcy looked at her daughter with fierce determination. "I'm going to make this right. I won't forgive them for what they did. I won't move on. I won't let it go. I'm going to win." How? By being better than them. By being smarter. By being more prepared. Marcy opened her car door. They thought they buried me. They were wrong. As they walked toward the house, Celeste's phone buzzed with a text message. Marcy's phone rang at the same time. "Marcy? This is Opal Montgomery." Marcy stopped walking. Opal Montgomery had been the senior court clerk in Judge Whitaker's courtroom for 30 years before retiring 5 years ago. She'd seen every case, heard every argument, filed every document. "Mrs. Montgomery, I didn't expect to hear from you. I saw you in court today. Took me a minute to recognize you, but I never forget a face. I'm surprised you remember me. Oh, honey, I remember everything about your case. It's been eating at me for 15 years. Marcy's pulse quickened. "What do you mean? Can we meet somewhere private? I have some things you need to see." "What kind of things?" "Court files, private memos, documents that should have been part of the public record, but somehow got misfiled." Opal's voice dropped to a whisper. "Documents that show patterns in Vincent Hale's cases, patterns that go back years." Marcy felt something electric run through her veins. "When?" "Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. There's a diner on Peachtree called Mel's. You know it. I'll find it. Come alone. And Marcy, be careful. Some people have invested a lot in keeping the past buried." The line went dead. Marcy stared at her phone, her mind racing. "Who was that?" Celeste asked. "Someone who might have answers." "To what?" Marcy looked back at the courthouse in the distance, barely visible through the trees. To why the good guys don't always win, and how to change that. The next evening, Marcy arrived at Mel's Diner 15 minutes early. The place was a throwback to the 1950s, with red vinyl booths, checkered floors, and neon signs advertising milkshakes and burgers. A handful of customers sat scattered throughout the restaurant, most of them focused on their phones or newspapers. Marcy chose a corner booth with a clear view of the entrance and ordered coffee. At exactly 7 o'clock, Opal Montgomery walked through the door. She was smaller than Marcy remembered, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She wore a simple blue dress and carried a large canvas tote bag that looked heavy. "Marcy." Opal slid into the booth across from her. "You look good. Older, but good." "Thank you for calling me. I should have called you years ago." Opal ordered tea from the waitress, then waited until they were alone again. "I've been carrying this guilt for 15 years, watching what happened to you, knowing what I knew, and not having the courage to speak up." "What do you know?" Opal opened her tote bag and pulled out a thick manila folder. "Vincent Hale has been running the same scam for 20 years. Your case wasn't the first time he manipulated the system. It wasn't even the 10th. She opened the folder and spread documents across the table. Court filings, financial records, correspondence between law firms, internal memos from the courthouse. "I kept copies of everything," Opal said. "Call it professional curiosity or just instinct. But something about Vincent's cases always felt wrong. Too many favorable rulings. Too many prosecution witnesses who changed their stories. Too many judges who suddenly developed convenient memory problems." Marcy picked up one of the documents, a memo from Judge Whitaker's office dated 3 months before her case. It detailed concerns about irregularities in discovery practices by Vincent's firm, but recommended no action due to insufficient evidence. "He knew," Marcy whispered. "He knew. They all knew. But Vincent was connected. His firm donated money to judicial campaigns. They hosted fundraisers for politicians. They had friends in the State Bar Association." Opal pointed to another document. "This is from the Morrison case in 2003. Environmental lawsuit against a chemical company. Vincent represented the defense. 3 key witnesses for the plaintiffs either disappeared or suddenly refused to testify. The case was dismissed." "How many cases are we talking about?" "I found patterns in at least 15 major cases over 20 years, maybe more. Vincent perfected the art of legal intimidation and procedural manipulation." Marcy studied the documents, her trained legal mind automatically organizing the information into categories. "This is enough to file complaints with the State Bar. Multiple complaints. It's enough to do more than that." Opal's voice was barely above a whisper. "Look at the financial records." She pulled out bank statements and wire transfer records. Vincent's firm maintains several shell companies. They've been using them to funnel money to witnesses, experts, and even court staff in other jurisdictions. Bribery? It's hard to prove directly, but the timing is suspicious. Large payments to expert witnesses right before they change their testimony. Donations to charities run by judges' family members right before favorable rulings. Marcy felt her pulse quicken. This wasn't just about her case anymore. This was about systematic corruption that had affected hundreds of people. "Why are you showing me this now?" Opal looked down at her hands. "Because I'm dying, Marcy. Pancreatic cancer. The doctors give me 6 months, maybe less. I'm sorry. I don't want to die knowing I stayed silent. Your case was the worst because you were innocent and you were fighting for people who really needed help. Watching Vincent destroy you while Whitaker sat there and did nothing, it broke something in me. What do you want me to do with this?" "What you do best. Build a case. Find the truth. Make them pay." Marcy gathered the documents carefully. This kind of investigation takes time. Resources. I'm just one person. You're not alone. Opal smiled. There's a detective who's been asking questions about Vincent's firm for months. Bryson Cade. He's honest, which is rare. He might help you. Why would a detective be interested in Vincent? Because one of Vincent's former clients is connected to a murder case Cade is working. Nothing direct, but enough to make him curious about the firm's practices. Marcy's mind was already working, formulating strategies, identifying next steps. I need to verify all of this, cross-reference it with public records, find additional sources. I can help with the courthouse records. I still have friends there. It's dangerous. If Vincent finds out we're investigating him, let him find out. Opal's eyes flashed with determination. I am too old and too sick to be afraid of Vincent Hale. They talked for another hour, going through each document, identifying key evidence and planning their approach. When they finally left the diner, Marcy felt something she hadn't experienced in 15 years. Hope, but it wasn't the soft, gentle hope of someone waiting for justice to happen naturally. It was the hard, sharp hope of someone who intended to make justice happen whether the system wanted it or not. Driving home, Marcy's phone buzzed with a text from Celeste. "Working late again? There's leftover pizza in the fridge." Marcy smiled. Her daughter had no idea that everything was about to change, that the quiet, careful life they'd built was about to explode into something much bigger and more dangerous. She pulled into her driveway and sat in the car for a moment, looking at her modest house. 15 years ago, she'd lost a mansion, a luxury car, a prestigious career, and a marriage. But she'd gained something too, the knowledge that she could survive anything. And now, finally, she had the tools to fight back. Marcy gathered Opal's documents and walked toward her front door. Tomorrow, she would start building the case that would either vindicate her completely or destroy her all over again. Either way, she was done hiding. Detective Bryson Cade sat at his desk in the Atlanta Police Department's downtown precinct, staring at a stack of files that seemed to grow taller every day. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he kept drinking it anyway. The murder case he'd been working for 3 months had hit another dead end, and his captain was asking uncomfortable questions about progress. The victim was a pharmaceutical company whistleblower named David Chin, who'd been found shot in his apartment. No forced entry, no robbery, no obvious motive except for the fact that he'd been scheduled to testify in a civil lawsuit the following week. The lawsuit was against Meridian Holdings' Vincent Hale's client. Cade rubbed his tired eyes and opened Chen's file again. Something about the timing bothered him. Chen gets subpoenaed on Monday. Chen calls his lawyer Tuesday morning, saying he has new information about the case. Chen turns up dead Tuesday night. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. "Detective Cade, this is Marceline Voss. I believe you've been investigating some connections to Vincent Hale's law firm." Cade straightened up. He'd heard that name recently but couldn't place it. "I'm sorry, who is this?" "I'm an attorney. I have information about Vincent Hale that might be relevant to your case." "What kind of information?" "The kind that suggests your murder victim wasn't the first person to die conveniently before they could testify against one of Vincent's clients." Cade grabbed a pen. "I'm listening." "Not over the phone. Can we meet?" "Where?" "There's a coffee shop on Marietta Street called Java Joe's. 1 hour." The line went dead. Cade stared at his phone, then looked back at Chen's file. What the hell? An hour later, he sat across from a woman in her early 50s with sharp green eyes and graying brown hair pulled back in a professional bun. She wore a simple black suit and carried a leather briefcase that looked expensive but old. "You're Marceline Voss," he said. "I am. And you're Detective Cade. How do you know about my case?" Marcy opened her briefcase and pulled out a thin folder. "Because I've been researching Vincent Hale's business practices for the past 2 weeks. Your victim, David Chin, was the 3rd person in 5 years to die or disappear before testifying against Vincent's clients." She slid a document across the table. It was a timeline showing 3 separate cases where key witnesses had either died, vanished, or suddenly refused to cooperate. "This is circumstantial," Cade said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Individually, yes, but taken together, it suggests a pattern." Cade studied the timeline. "Why are you investigating Vincent Hale?" Because he destroyed my career 15 years ago using illegal methods, and I recently obtained evidence that he's been doing it to other people ever since. What kind of evidence? Marcy pulled out more documents, court records, financial statements, correspondence between law firms, systematic witness intimidation, bribery of expert witnesses, obstruction of justice, conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. These are serious accusations. They're serious crimes. Marcy's voice was steady, but Cade could see the anger simmering underneath. And I can prove all of it. Why come to me? Because you're the only cop in this city who seems interested in looking deeper than the surface. Because your case gives us leverage we wouldn't have otherwise. And because I need someone with subpoena power to get the records I can't access myself. Cade leaned back in his chair. This was either the break he'd been looking for, or the biggest mistake of his career. What do you want me to do? Help me gather evidence. Vincent's firm keeps digital records of all their cases. If we can get access to their servers, we can cross-reference witness payments, timeline irregularities, and communication patterns. That requires a warrant. You have probable cause. David Chen was murdered to prevent his testimony. That makes this a capital case, which gives you broader investigative authority. Cade had to admit she was right. And if even half of what she was saying was true, Vincent Hale needed to be stopped. What's your angle in this? He asked. Justice. Nothing more, nothing less. Bullshit. Nobody spends 2 weeks building a case against someone just for justice. This is personal. Marcy's expression hardened. You're right. It's personal. Vincent destroyed my life, my career, and my family. He cost me everything I'd worked for. But that doesn't make the evidence less valid or the crimes less real. And you want revenge. I want accountability. There's a difference. Cade studied her face. She was angry, yes, but she was also methodical and controlled. Not the type to let emotion cloud her judgment. If I help you with this, I need guarantees. Everything we do has to be by the book. I won't risk my badge or compromise a criminal case because you have a personal vendetta. Agreed. And if we find evidence that you were involved in anything illegal 15 years ago, you'll arrest me. I understand. Cade made his decision. Okay, but we do this my way. For the next 2 hours, they went through Marcy's evidence piece by piece. She'd been thorough, cross-referencing court records, identifying patterns in Vincent's cases, and documenting financial irregularities that suggested witness tampering. How did you get all this? Cade asked. Public records, Freedom of Information Act requests, court filings, and a source inside the courthouse who's been keeping track of Vincent's activities for years. Who's your source? A retired court clerk named Opal Montgomery. She worked in Judge Whitaker's courtroom for 30 years. Cade recognized the name. Opal Montgomery was legendary in legal circles, the woman who knew where every document was filed and remembered every case that passed through her courtroom. She'll testify. If necessary, yes. As they prepared to leave, Cade asked one final question. What's your endgame here? Let's say we prove Vincent's been bribing witnesses and intimidating plaintiffs. What do you want to happen to him? Marcy's smile was cold as ice. I want him to lose everything the same way I did. His career, his reputation, his freedom. I want him to know what it feels like to be destroyed by someone who's better at the game than he is. And you think you're better at the game. Detective, I've spent 15 years studying his methods, learning from his mistakes and preparing for this moment. He taught me how to be ruthless. Now I'm going to show him what that looks like. Celeste found her mother in the home office at 11 o'clock that night, surrounded by stacks of documents and legal pads covered with notes. The desk lamp cast harsh shadows across Marcy's face as she cross-referenced financial records with court dates. Mom, it's past 11. Marcy didn't look up. I know what time it is. You've been in here for 4 hours. You missed dinner. Again. I had a sandwich. A granola bar is not a sandwich. Celeste leaned against the doorframe. What is all this stuff? Research. Research for what? Now Marcy looked up. Her daughter stood in the doorway wearing pajama pants and an old t-shirt, her dark hair messy from sleep. She looked so young, so innocent, so completely unprepared for what was coming. It's complicated, Marcy said. You keep saying that, but I'm not stupid, Mom. This isn't just about that business dispute from the other day, is it? Marcy set down her pen and rubbed her eyes. No, it's not. Then what is it about? It's about fixing something that was broken a long time ago. Celeste walked into the office and sat down in the chair across from the desk. The thing that happened 15 years ago, with Vincent and the judge. Yes, and you think you can fix it now? I know I can. Celeste picked up one of the documents from the desk, a bank statement with several transactions highlighted in yellow. By doing what exactly? By proving that Vincent Hale is a criminal who's been manipulating the legal system for 20 years. By showing that he destroyed my career to cover up his own crimes. By making sure he never hurts anyone else the way he hurt me. Mom. Celeste's voice was concerned. This sounds like it's getting pretty intense. It is intense. And kind of scary. Marcy leaned forward. Are you afraid? Not afraid, but worried. About you. About what this is doing to you. What do you mean? Celeste gestured at the stacks of papers, the timeline charts taped to the wall, the legal pads filled with notes in Marcy's precise handwriting. Look at this place. Look at yourself. You're obsessed. I'm focused. You're obsessed. And I'm worried that you're going to cross lines you can't uncross. Marcy's jaw tightened. What lines? I don't know. But Mom, the way you talk about this guy Vincent, it's like you hate him more than anything in the world. I do. That's not healthy. Healthy. Marcy stood up abruptly. You want to know what's not healthy? What he did to me. What he did to hundreds of other people. Innocent people who trusted the system to protect them. I get that he hurt you. No, you don't get it. Marcy's voice rose. You have no idea what he took from me. From us. Then tell me. Marcy walked to the window and stared out at the dark street. When I lost my job, we lost our house. A 4-bedroom colonial in Buckhead with a pool and a 3-car garage. We had to move into a 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood where you couldn't play outside after dark. Celeste was quiet, listening. Your father started drinking. The stress of being married to someone the legal community saw as toxic destroyed his career too. He blamed me for everything, the money problems, the social isolation, the fact that his law firm partners wouldn't invite us to parties anymore. I remember some of that. You were 2 years old. You don't remember the worst of it. The nights he came home drunk and screaming. The fights that went on for hours. The morning I found him passed out on the kitchen floor next to an empty bottle of bourbon and divorce papers. Marcy turned back to face her daughter. I didn't just lose a career, Celeste. I lost my dignity, my reputation, my marriage, and my chance at a normal life. Vincent Hale took everything that mattered to me. But you rebuilt. I survived. There's a difference. Marcy's voice was bitter. I worked 3 part-time jobs to keep us afloat. Paralegal work, document review, legal research for lawyers who wouldn't put my name on their cases. I spent 15 years being invisible, being forgotten, being nothing. Celeste's eyes filled with tears. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know it was that bad. I didn't want you to know. I wanted you to have a normal childhood despite everything that happened. But now you want revenge. I want justice. What's the difference? Marcy sat back down at her desk. Justice is about making things right. It's about holding people accountable for their actions. It's about making sure the system works the way it's supposed to work. And revenge. Revenge is personal. It's about hurting someone because they hurt you. Which one is this? Marcy looked at her daughter for a long moment. Both. The honesty hung in the air between them. Celeste wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I'm scared you're going to do something that hurts you worse than he already has, she said quietly. I'm not going to let him hurt anyone else. But what if stopping him costs you everything again? What if you win this fight but lose yourself in the process? Marcy reached across the desk and took her daughter's hand. I lost myself 15 years ago, sweetheart. What I'm doing now is finding myself again, by destroying someone else, by being the lawyer I was meant to be, by fighting for people who can't fight for themselves, by making sure that powerful people can't just crush innocent people whenever it's convenient. Celeste squeezed her mother's hand. Just promise me you won't let this consume you completely. Promise me you'll remember that you have a life beyond Vincent Hale. I promise. But even as she said the words, Marcy knew they might be a lie. She'd spent 15 years being consumed by what Vincent had done to her. Now that she finally had a chance to fight back, she wasn't sure she could stop herself from seeing it through to the absolute end. Whatever that end might look like, the preliminary hearing was scheduled for 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning in Judge Whitaker's courtroom. Marcy arrived early, carrying 2 briefcases and wearing her best navy suit. She'd spent the weekend preparing, cross-referencing every piece of evidence, anticipating every possible argument Vincent's team might make. Detective Cade sat in the gallery, having provided testimony earlier about the evidence discovered in David Chen's murder investigation. His presence gave weight to the proceedings. This wasn't just a civil dispute anymore. It was connected to a criminal case. Vincent Hale entered the courtroom flanked by 3 attorneys from his firm, all wearing expensive suits and carrying designer briefcases. He looked confident, relaxed, like someone who'd faced countless accusations and emerged unscathed. But when he saw Marcy at the plaintiff's table, his expression changed. The confidence flickered for just a moment, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. Judge Whitaker took his seat behind the bench, looking older and more tired than Marcy remembered. His hands shook slightly as he organized his papers. We're here today for a preliminary hearing in the matter of Voss versus Hale, he announced. Ms. Voss, you may proceed with your opening statement. Marcy stood up. Your Honor, I'm here today to present evidence of a 20-year pattern of criminal conduct by the defendant, Vincent Hale, and his law firm. This conduct includes witness intimidation, bribery of expert witnesses, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. Vincent's lead attorney, Sandra Mills, immediately rose. Objection, Your Honor. These are inflammatory accusations without foundation. Overruled. Whitaker's voice was quiet. Continue, Ms. Voss. Marcy opened her first briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Your Honor, I have documented evidence of at least 15 cases over the past 20 years where Mr. Hale's firm used illegal methods to manipulate legal proceedings. She approached the bench and handed copies of the documents to both the judge and opposing counsel. These financial records show systematic payments to witnesses immediately before they changed their testimony. These emails show coordination between Mr. Hale's firm and supposed independent expert witnesses. These court filings show a pattern of procedural manipulation designed to exhaust opposing parties' resources. Vincent leaned over and whispered urgently to his attorney. Mills shuffled through the documents, her face growing paler with each page. Furthermore, Marcy continued, Mr. Hale's actions 15 years ago in the Meridian Pharmaceutical case were part of this same pattern. He deliberately concealed evidence, intimidated witnesses, and used his firm's resources to destroy my career when I attempted to expose his methods. Your Honor, Mills interrupted, these allegations are completely unfounded. Ms. Voss was investigated by the State Bar Association 15 years ago for unethical conduct. She has no credibility. That investigation was compromised from the beginning, Marcy said calmly. As these documents will show, Mr. Hale's firm had financial relationships with several members of the investigative committee. She pulled out another folder. Bank records showing payments from shell companies controlled by Hale's firm to law firms representing committee members, family members. Campaign contributions to judges who later ruled in Mr. Hale's favor. Consulting fees paid to expert witnesses who testified against me. Whitaker's face had gone completely white. He stared at the documents in front of him without speaking. Your Honor. Mills prompted. Whitaker blinked and looked up. Mr. Hale, do you wish to respond to these allegations? Vincent stood up slowly. For the first time since Marcy had known him, he looked uncertain. Your Honor, these accusations are the desperate fabrications of someone whose career was rightfully ended by her own unethical conduct. Then you deny the authenticity of these financial records. Aye, we would need time to review all of these documents before. That's a yes or no question, Mr. Hale. Vincent's face flushed red. I deny any wrongdoing. But you don't deny the authenticity of the records. A long pause. We would need our accounting firm to verify. Your Honor, Marcy interrupted, I have additional evidence that Mr. Hale's firm is currently engaged in witness tampering related to a murder investigation. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Detective Cade leaned forward in his seat. Mr. Hale's current client, Meridian Holdings, was being sued by David Chin, a pharmaceutical company whistleblower. Mr. Chen was scheduled to testify about evidence of corporate malfeasance. 3 days after being subpoenaed, Mr. Chen was found murdered in his apartment. Objection! Mills shot to her feet. Your Honor, there's no evidence connecting my client to any murder. Phone records, Marcy said simply. She pulled out another document, showing 17 calls between Mr. Hale's office and an unlisted number registered to a private investigation firm with known connections to organized crime. These calls occurred in the 3 days between Mr. Chen's subpoena and his death. The courtroom fell silent. Vincent looked like he might be sick. Whitaker stared at the phone records for a full minute before speaking. Ms. Voss, these are very serious allegations. Yes, Your Honor, they are. Mr. Hale, how do you explain these phone calls? Vincent whispered frantically with his attorneys. Finally, Mills spoke up. Your Honor, my client invokes his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. In a civil proceeding, invoking the Fifth Amendment was tantamount to an admission of guilt. Marcy felt a surge of satisfaction, but she kept her expression neutral. Your Honor, I move for an immediate injunction preventing Mr. Hale and his firm from contacting any witnesses related to pending litigation. I also request that this court refer these matters to the State Bar Association and the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. Whitaker's hands were shaking now. He looked like a man watching his world collapse. This court will need to recess to consider these motions. Your Honor, Marcy said quietly, with respect, there's one more thing. What is it? 15 years ago, you had evidence of Mr. Hale's misconduct. You chose not to act on it. These documents show that your inaction enabled him to continue harming innocent people for 2 decades. The courtroom was dead silent. Whitaker stared at Marcy with something between horror and recognition. That's not a question for this court, he said finally. No, Your Honor. It's not a question. It's a statement of fact. Marcy gathered her documents and sat down. She'd accomplished what she'd come to do. The truth was out. Vincent was exposed. Whitaker was cornered. Now she had to wait and see if the system would finally deliver the justice it had denied her 15 years ago. The story broke on the 11 o'clock news that night. prominent Atlanta attorney linked to murder investigation. The reporter stood outside Vincent Hale's law firm, explaining how new evidence had connected the firm to potential witness tampering in a capital murder case. Marcy watched from her living room, Celeste curled up beside her on the couch. The television showed Vincent leaving the courthouse earlier that day, surrounded by reporters shouting questions. He looked haggard, defeated, nothing like the confident predator who destroyed her career. "He looks scared," Celeste observed. "He should be." The news report continued with background on Vincent's firm, their high-profile clients, and their reputation for aggressive litigation tactics. Then the reporter mentioned Marcy's name. The evidence was presented by attorney Marceline Voss, who had her own confrontation with Hale 15 years ago. Voss alleges that Hale used similar tactics to destroy her career when she attempted to expose corruption at his firm. They showed footage of Marcy leaving the courthouse, looking calm and professional despite the chaos around her. Sources close to the investigation say this may be just the beginning. State bar officials have announced they're opening a formal inquiry into Hale's practices, and the district attorney's office has confirmed they're reviewing the evidence for potential criminal charges. Marcy's phone started ringing. The first call was from a reporter at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, then Channel 5 News, then a legal blogger who'd been following corruption cases for years. She ignored them all. The second call that mattered came from Detective Cade. "We got the warrant," he said without preamble. "For what?" "Vincent's law firm. We're executing it tomorrow morning. Financial records, client communications, everything. The murder connection gave us probable cause for a full forensic accounting." Marcy felt her pulse quicken. "What do you need from me?" "Just stay available. If we find what I think we're going to find, we'll need you to help us understand the legal implications." "I'll be ready." The third call came an hour later. Opal Montgomery's voice was strained, frightened. "Marcy, someone broke into my house tonight." "What? Are you okay?" "I'm fine. I wasn't home, but they went through everything. All my files, my computer, even my medicine cabinet. They were looking for something specific." "Did you call the police?" "What's the point? They didn't take anything valuable. Just tossed the place and left." "Where are you now?" "At my daughter's house." "But Marcy, they know about the documents I gave you." "Somehow they know." Marcy's blood ran cold. "How?" "I don't know. But you need to be careful. If they're willing to break into an old woman's house, they won't hesitate to come after you." "I can take care of myself." "This isn't about what you can handle. It's about how far they'll go to protect themselves. Vincent's firm has millions of dollars in revenue and powerful clients. They won't let one person destroy all of that without a fight." After Opal hung up, Marcy walked through her house, checking locks, closing curtains, making sure everything was secure. Celeste watched from the kitchen doorway. "Mom, what's wrong?" "Nothing. Just being cautious. Someone threatened you, didn't they?" Marcy paused at the front window, peering through the blinds at the street outside. A dark sedan was parked across from their house, a car she didn't recognize in a neighborhood where she knew every vehicle. "Maybe. I'm not sure." "That's it." Celeste grabbed her phone. "I'm calling Dad." "No." Marcy's voice was sharp. "We're not calling your father." "Mom, if you're in danger." "I'm not in danger. I'm just being prepared." But even as she said the words, Marcy knew they weren't entirely true. She'd kicked a hornet's nest, and the hornets were starting to swarm. Vincent had built his career on intimidation and manipulation. Now that his back was against the wall, he might be willing to escalate to more direct methods. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You should have stayed buried." Marcy showed the message to Celeste, who immediately started dialing 911. "Wait," Marcy said. "Wait for what?" "Someone just threatened you." "It's not a direct threat. It's psychological warfare. Vincent's trying to scare me into backing down. Well, it's working on me. Marcy took the phone from her daughter and saved the message. This is actually good. How is a threat good? Because it means he's panicking. People who are in control don't send desperate text messages. They handle problems through official channels. Or they hire people to make problems disappear. The thought had occurred to Marcy too. David Chen's murder proved that Vincent's associates were willing to use violence when necessary. But that same murder had also brought Detective Cade into the picture, which meant any further violence would bring even more scrutiny. Pack a bag, Marcy said finally. What? Pack a bag. Enough clothes for a few days. We're going to stay at a hotel until this blows over. I thought you said you weren't in danger. I said I wasn't sure. Now I'm being sure. As they packed, Marcy's mind raced through contingencies. The warrant would be executed tomorrow morning. By afternoon, there would likely be enough evidence to arrest Vincent and several members of his firm. But the hours between now and then were the most dangerous. Vincent was cornered, desperate, and running out of options. That made him more dangerous than he'd ever been. But it also made him vulnerable. And Marcy intended to take full advantage of that vulnerability. The federal courthouse was buzzing with activity by 8 o'clock in the morning. News vans lined the street outside. Reporters interviewed anyone willing to talk, and photographers captured every person entering the building. Marcy arrived in a black town car driven by Detective Cade. They'd spent the night at a downtown hotel after the FBI's forensic accounting team had worked through the early hours, analyzing the evidence seized from Vincent's law firm. Ready for this? Cade asked as they approached the courthouse steps. I've been ready for 15 years. The main hearing room was packed. Vincent sat at the defendant's table. With his remaining attorneys, his firm had lost half its partners overnight as news of the criminal investigation spread. He looked haggard, his usually perfect hair disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled. Judge Patricia Harrison presided over the hearing. She was in her 60s, with silver hair and no-nonsense demeanor. Unlike Whitaker, who had recused himself from all proceedings, Harrison had a reputation for running a clean courtroom. We're here today for an emergency hearing in the matter of the state of Georgia versus Vincent Hale and Associates, Harrison announced. This court has received extensive evidence of potential criminal conduct, and we need to determine the appropriate course of action. Assistant District Attorney Maria Santos stood to present the state's case. She was in her 40s, Latina, with dark hair pulled back severely and sharp black eyes that missed nothing. Your Honor, the evidence we've uncovered over the past 48 hours paints a picture of systematic criminal enterprise spanning 2 decades. Mr. Hale and his associates have engaged in witness intimidation, bribery, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. Furthermore, we have reason to believe they were directly involved in the murder of David Chen. Vincent's attorney, a nervous-looking man named Robert Ford, immediately stood up. Your Honor, these allegations are completely unfounded. Your client has already invoked his Fifth Amendment rights, Harrison interrupted, which suggests he has something to hide. Santos continued, we have financial records showing payments totaling over $2 million to private investigators, known criminals, and offshore shell companies. We have recorded conversations between Mr. Hale and associates discussing handling problem witnesses, and we have forensic evidence linking his firm to David Chen's murder. Marcy sat in the gallery, watching Vincent's world collapse in real time. Everything she'd worked for over the past month was coming together. Additionally, Santos said, we've uncovered evidence that Mr. Hale's corruption extends beyond his own cases. He was part of a network that included judges, court clerks, and state bar officials. This wasn't just one bad lawyer, it was systematic corruption of our entire legal system. Harrison looked grim. Mr. Ford, does your client wish to respond to these charges? Ford whispered frantically with Vincent, then stood up slowly. Your Honor, my client maintains his innocence and requests that all evidence be subjected to rigorous scrutiny before any conclusions are drawn. That's not a response, Counselor. That's a stalling tactic. At that moment, the courtroom doors opened and Opal Montgomery walked in, supported by a younger woman who was obviously her daughter. Despite her age and recent illness, Opal looked determined. Your Honor, Santos said, we have one more witness we'd like to call. Proceed. Opal was sworn in and took the witness stand. Her voice was weak but clear as she began to speak. I worked in this courthouse for 30 years. I saw thousands of cases, thousands of lawyers, thousands of judges, but I never saw anything like what Vincent Hale was doing. She looked directly at Vincent as she spoke. He didn't just break the law, he corrupted it. He turned our justice system into his personal weapon, and he used it to destroy innocent people. Can you be more specific? Santos asked. I kept records, detailed records. Every suspicious ruling, every witness who suddenly changed their story, every expert who contradicted their own previous testimony. I documented it all because I knew someday someone would need proof. Opal opened a folder and pulled out a thick stack of papers. These are copies of sealed communications between Mr. Hale's firm and Judge Whitaker's office. They show coordination on case scheduling, evidence rulings, and witness credibility determinations. Vincent's face went completely white. Ford slumped in his chair, realizing his client's situation was hopeless. Furthermore, Opal continued, I have recordings. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Harrison banged her gavel for order. What kind of recordings? Santos asked. Phone conversations between Vincent and Judge Whitaker. Meetings in Whitaker's chambers where they discussed how to handle problematic cases. Conversations about money changing hands. Santos played one of the recordings on the courtroom audio system. Vincent's voice was clearly audible discussing how to neutralize a witness who was causing problems in a pharmaceutical lawsuit. We can't let this guy testify, Vincent's voice said through the speakers. Whatever it takes. Judge Whitaker's voice responded, Leave that to me. I'll find a procedural reason to exclude him. The recording continued with Vincent suggesting they take care of the witness permanently if legal methods failed as the recording played. Vincent stood up abruptly. This is fabricated evidence. Those recordings are fake. Sit down, Mr. Hale, Harrison ordered. I will not sit here and listen to lies. Mr. Ford, control your client. Ford tried to pull Vincent back into his chair, but Vincent shook him off. You want to know the truth? Fine. I did what I had to do to win cases. That's what lawyers do. We use every advantage we have. Vincent, shut up, Ford hissed, but Vincent was beyond controlling now. 15 years of carefully maintained composure cracked under the pressure. You think the legal system is about justice? It's about power. It's about who has the best lawyers, the most money, the strongest connections. Mr. Hale, Harrison warned. Marceline Voss was a threat to that system, Vincent continued, pointing at Marcy in the gallery. She was naive enough to think the truth mattered more than winning. She had to be stopped. The courtroom was dead silent except for Vincent's increasingly desperate voice. So yes, I destroyed her career. Yes, I manipulated judges and intimidated witnesses. Yes, I did whatever was necessary to protect my clients and my firm, because that's how the real world works. Ford had given up trying to silence his client. Santos was frantically taking notes. Harrison looked like she'd never seen anything like this in 30 years on the bench. And David Chin. Harrison asked quietly that Vincent's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The brief moment of manic honesty was over, replaced by the realization of what he'd just confessed to in open court. That's not. I need to speak with my attorney. I think you've said quite enough, Harrison replied. The hearing recessed for 2 hours while prosecutors processed Vincent's spontaneous confession. Marcy sat in the courthouse cafeteria with Detective Cade, drinking coffee and trying to process what had just happened. In 20 years of police work, I've never seen anything like that, Cade said. He just exploded. 15 years of pressure finally found a crack, Marcy replied. Vincent's always been arrogant, but he's also been careful. When careful failed, arrogance was all he had left. Think it's enough to convict him? Of corruption and obstruction? Absolutely. Of murder? That depends on what else you found in those financial records. Cade pulled out his phone and scrolled through messages from the forensic accounting team. Wire transfers to a company called Security Solutions International. Guess what SSI specializes in? Corporate espionage and witness elimination. Among other things, the payment to SSI was made 3 days before David Chen's murder. The amount matches their standard fee for permanent problem resolution. Marcy felt a chill run down her spine. She'd known Vincent was ruthless, but part of her had hoped he'd stopped short of murder. There's more, Cade continued. Remember Judge Whitaker. What about him? He's been admitted to the hospital. Apparent heart attack this morning, right after he heard about the recordings. Is he? He's alive, but his doctors say the stress might have triggered it. Apparently, he's been asking to speak with prosecutors about making a deal. Marcy's phone buzzed with a text from Celeste, watching the news. You're on every channel. Are you okay? She typed back, fine. Stay at school. I'll call you later. Another text came in from an unknown number. You have no idea what you've started. This time, Marcy showed the message to Cade immediately. Different number than yesterday, he observed. Same sentiment. We should get you a protection detail. I don't think that's necessary anymore. Vincent's finished. His firm is destroyed. His associates are probably more concerned with saving themselves than threatening me. But even as she said it, Marcy felt uneasy. Vincent's confession had been a victory, but it had also revealed the scope of the corruption they were dealing with. If his network included judges, court officials, and state bar members, how many other people might be willing to protect their own interests? They returned to the courtroom for the afternoon session. Vincent sat slumped in his chair, looking like a man who'd aged 10 years in 10 hours. His attorney had been replaced by a public defender. Ford had apparently decided his reputation couldn't survive association with the case. Judge Harrison called the court to order. Before we proceed with formal charges, I understand Mr. Hale wishes to make a statement. Vincent stood up slowly. His voice was hoarse, defeated. Your Honor, I need to tell the truth about what happened 15 years ago. Marcy leaned forward, her pulse quickening. Marceline Voss was not guilty of any ethical violations, Vincent continued. The evidence against her was fabricated by my firm. We hacked into her computer systems, planted false documents, and paid witnesses to lie about her conduct. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Harrison banged her gavel. Why? Harrison asked. Because she had uncovered our methods. She had evidence that would have exposed our entire operation. We couldn't let her testify in the pharmaceutical case. So you destroyed her career instead. We destroyed her life. Vincent looked directly at Marcy. We took everything from her, her job, her reputation, her marriage, her future. We turned her into a pariah in her own profession. Marcy felt tears stinging her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. This was what she'd waited 15 years to hear, but it brought no satisfaction, only a deep, aching sadness for all the time that had been lost. And Judge Whitaker? Harrison prompted. He was part of it from the beginning. We paid him to rule against her, to exclude her evidence, to enable our cover-up. He knew she was innocent, but he destroyed her anyway because we made it worth his while. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place. Marcy had always wondered how the system had failed her so completely. Now, she knew it hadn't failed. It had been deliberately corrupted. "Your Honor," Vincent said, "I want to cooperate fully with prosecutors. I'll provide evidence against everyone involved in this conspiracy, including judges, state bar officials, and other law firms. But I want Ms. Voss to know." His voice broke. "I want her to know that I'm sorry. What we did to her was unforgivable." Marcy stood up in the gallery. The entire courtroom turned to look at her. "Apologies don't give me back 15 years of my life," she said quietly. "They don't restore my marriage or undo the damage to my reputation. They don't compensate for the careers I could have had or the clients I could have helped." Vincent nodded, tears streaming down his face. "But they're a start," Marcy continued. "And if your cooperation helps prevent this from happening to anyone else, then maybe some good can come from all this destruction." Harrison addressed the courtroom. "This court will now recess while prosecutors determine the appropriate charges based on Mr. Hale's confession and cooperation. Given the scope of this conspiracy, I expect this investigation will continue for some time." As people filed out of the courtroom, Marcy remained seated. 15 years of anger, resentment, and determination had led to this moment. Vincent was destroyed. Whitaker was exposed. The truth was finally revealed. Why did she feel so empty? 3 months later, Marcy stood outside the Georgia State Bar Association headquarters, watching as workers removed Judge Whitaker's name from the building's memorial wall. He died of a second heart attack 2 weeks earlier, just days before his scheduled testimony about judicial corruption. Vincent Hale had been sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for racketeering, conspiracy, and accessory to murder. His law firm had been dissolved, its assets seized to compensate victims. 6 other judges and dozens of attorneys were under investigation. Celeste walked up beside her mother, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the shop across the street. "Penny for your thoughts," she said. "Just thinking about everything that's changed." "Good changes." Marcy considered the question. The State Bar Association had issued a formal apology and restored her license with full honors. She'd been offered positions at 3 major law firms. The book deals and speaking engagements could make her financially secure for life. "Mostly good," she said finally. But it doesn't bring back the time that was lost. It doesn't undo the damage that was done to so many people." They walked toward Marcy's new office, building a modest space in downtown Atlanta where she decided to open her own practice, specializing in legal ethics and whistleblower protection. "So what happens now?" Celeste asked. "Now I do what I should have been doing all along. I help people who are fighting corrupt systems. I make sure other Vincent Hales can't destroy innocent lives. And you never forgive him for what he did to us." Marcy paused at the entrance to her building. The question had been weighing on her for months. Everyone, reporters, friends. Even Celeste seemed to expect her to find some kind of closure, some way to move past the anger and resentment. "I don't forgive him," she said finally. "I can't. What he did was unforgivable. But you're not angry anymore." "No, I'm not angry. I'm determined." They rode the elevator to the 15th floor. Marcy's office was small but well appointed, with a view of the courthouse where Vincent had confessed. Her desk was already covered with case files, clients who'd been victimized by corrupt lawyers, judges, and officials. Detective Cade was waiting in the reception area, looking uncomfortable in his civilian clothes. "Ms. Voss, I have something for you." He handed her a thick envelope. "It's from David Chen's family. They wanted to thank you for making sure his death meant something." Marcy opened the envelope and found a letter written in careful handwriting. "Dear Ms. Voss, we know that David would want his death to help expose the truth and protect other people from suffering the same fate. Because of your courage and determination, The people who killed our son will face justice. Thank you for not giving up when everyone else would have walked away. With gratitude, the Chin family, Marcy felt tears in her eyes, but this time she didn't fight them. There's something else, Cade said. The FBI wants to hire you as a consultant. They're setting up a new task force to investigate corruption in state court systems nationwide. What would that involve? Traveling around the country, helping prosecutors identify patterns of judicial misconduct, training investigators to recognize the signs of systematic corruption. Marcy looked out her office window at the city she'd called home for her entire adult life. Atlanta held too many painful memories, but it also held everything she'd built during her comeback. I'll think about it, she said. After Cade left, Marcy and Celeste sat in the office's small conference room, eating takeout Chinese food and reviewing the day's mail. Mom, Celeste said suddenly, I'm proud of you. For what? For not becoming the thing you were fighting against. Marcy looked up from her lo mein. What do you mean? You could have become as ruthless and corrupt as Vincent. You could have used the same dirty tactics to destroy him, but you didn't. You beat him by being better than him. I beat him by being more patient than him, more thorough, more prepared, and more honest. That too. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Celeste asked, So what's our next case? Our next case? I'm thinking about law school. Someone needs to help you save the world from corrupt lawyers. Marcy smiled. It was the first genuinely happy smile she'd felt in 15 years. Well, there's this pharmaceutical company in Texas that's been bribing FDA officials. Mom. Yeah. This time, let's get them before they destroy any innocent people's lives. Marcy picked up the case file and opened it to the first page. Deal. Outside her office window, the city of Atlanta hummed with its usual energy. Somewhere out there, other Vincent Hales were probably manipulating the system, intimidating witnesses, corrupting judges. The fight against corruption would never really end. But for the first time in 15 years, Marcy Voss felt equipped to win it.